This episode is brought to you by the Pilbara Health Professionals Network, made possible by funding from BHP's Vital Resources Fund. Welcome back to our final episode in this series designed to support healthcare professionals living and working in the Pilbara region. My name is Casey Beros, and it's been such a pleasure to bring these episodes to you. But the fun isn't over yet, and today we've got a really important topic to discuss. Now, I'm not a healthcare professional. I'm a health journalist who has spent the last 15 years interviewing healthcare professionals. And it's safe to say that over that time, I've seen some change in the industry, but possibly not as much change as my guest. Dr Cherelle Fitzclarence is a rural generalist working as the Senior Medical Officer for the West Pilbara, and she's with me now. Cherelle, welcome. How different does the world look for young doctors these days in comparison to when you were starting out?
Thanks, Casey. Well, it is a different world, isn't it? Those of us who are older often quote, well, in my day, but the reality is that 30, 40, 50 years ago, juniors worked very long hours. Interns in the 60s in WA were expected to live at the hospital and they got one afternoon off a week. And the rest of the time they were rostered on. That can happen today, but juniors are more protected via the awards these days, so that we will try and only roster our juniors 40 hours. Certainly that's the juniors that work here in Karratha Health Campus have a 40-hour a week roster, which is much more manageable in terms of work-life balance than what has necessarily gone on in the past. So it is a different world, and junior doctors are taught about work-life balance in their undergraduate years as well. Sometimes talking about saying how important it is versus facilitating it are two different things. So it's important that we address the issues and recognise if we want to be the very best doctors we can be, then that involves looking after ourselves as well.
It sure does. Look, I'm obsessed with this concept of closing the gap between knowing and doing. And you touched on it there beautifully. You know, we're teaching younger doctors that they need to adhere to some semblance of work-life balance. And I want to tuck into that and self-care and, you know, perhaps how we're doing things differently these days. But before we get into that, you know, as somebody who grew up watching shows like Grey's Anatomy and all of those big kind of hospital shows, which for a lot of us who aren't in the medical profession, that's our understanding of what it's like. And it almost became, for me anyway, just part and parcel of the job, that you slept at the hospital and that, you know, you worked hard, you got good grades, you got into the medical profession, and then you got rewarded appropriately, but that you were effectively a slave to your job.
My experience was never bad, but that's certainly been the experience of some. And then add into Grey's Anatomy House and the way that the bosses treat the junior staff. Those programs were built on what has happened in the past, and hopefully we've moved beyond that. It's not acceptable to be expected to be at the hospital many, many unpaid hours and disadvantaged in terms of promotion if you're not there. It's not acceptable to be bullied by senior staff or any staff. It was never acceptable, and it's certainly not acceptable now and should be called out if it's occurring, I think.
I agree. One of the big buzzwords that we've used to almost reframe pulling our socks up and getting on with it, even when a job is really, really tough and really challenging, is resilience. And it seems to me as though, you know, from somebody on the outside looking in, that resilience is just a non-negotiable. It's a job criteria for being a healthcare professional and indeed a doctor. Is that your view? Can you be a doctor if you're not resilient?
I agree with you. I think resilience is an essential characteristic for doctors. Doctors see a wide breadth of wonderfully exciting, fantastic outcomes to the exact opposite. Doctors aren't machines. Things that the doctors see impact on the doctor. Some better at coping or covering up or managing the emotional toll. I think resilience can be learned. It is something we very much address with our junior staff, our medical students, our junior staff, and all our staff here, certainly in this site where we try and look out for each other and look after each other, because even the most resilient person has a breaking point. And I think it's important that as a team we look for each other. So that's a strategy to build resilience, if you like, by having a team we belong to. I think for someone who has little reserve and little resilience, then this career can be very traumatizing. Having said that, there's lots of different things that you can do in medicine. So if someone is very challenged by a certain part of medicine, there are other less confronting areas of medicine to work in. So medicine's a very broad spectrum of duties, if you like, and there's so many, many ways that doctors can make a difference to the world around them in what they do. So it behoves us to have some insight into our level of resilience, I guess. Part of looking after ourselves is putting ourselves in a position where we're happy at where we work and comfortable where we work.
I love that you called resilience a strategy, because it really is a tool to have in our toolkit rather than this you either have it or you don't. And another strategy that we all need to use, whether you work in this profession or not, is self-care. And whenever I ask, and I hate to generalize here, but particularly women about self-care, especially working parents, they'll joke, "What's that?" And in this era where we've glorified being busy, it's as though there's no room for something as indulgent, in inverted commas, as self-care. Once you add to that being a busy doctor or a healthcare professional and then living and working in a regional setting, which comes with its own unique set of challenges and opportunities. But if you add all of that together, I reckon you've got Buckley's chance on the self-care front. However, without it, we know that we burn out, as we've seen in abundance in the mass exodus of healthcare professionals over the course of the pandemic. For a lot of them, entirely understandably, it was too much. I'm almost scared to ask you this based on what I know of you, but I'm wondering what self-care looked like for you.
Oh, there you go. I've actually given this some thought. And over the years, I felt very guilty if I take time out for myself, which is manifestly unwise. But I was thinking, I actually do spend some time on self-care. I'm a committed Christian. I take a day out, 24 hours every week, a Sabbath, if you like. And that I don't feel guilty about. That's been part of my life for always. I really credit that taking the time out with helping me be resilient. It's a time to spend with family, time to do some reading, a time to go to church, time to spend time with friends. It's self-care. It might not be a pedicure or some other form, but it is very much self-care. And I put that together with when we get opportunity to go out bush or to read a book. I have quite a big library that drives my family mad because there's thousands of books that I've been collecting since I was a little girl. The problem is where to put them when you move quite a bit, which we've done over the years. So self-care looks different for different people. We need to apply the strategies that work for us. But I think the important message is that we actually need to take the time and not feel guilty. This is about consciously thinking about what we can do to refresh and renew and rejuvenate ourselves, which then allows us to take care of other people. If we can't take care of ourselves, it impacts on our ability to take care of other people. And that's what being a doctor is all about. We become doctors to care for other people and to make a difference. So if we want to do our job properly, we have to support ourselves.
It's so true. What you've just described so beautifully is a lesson for all of us in creating a pause, some distance between you and what you do, that you're a human being, not a human doing. You are not what you do for work. And whether it's through religion, like you described, or whether it's through community sport or meditation and mindfulness or exercise or travel or cooking, it's purely about building time into your schedule at a macro level. So thinking about what holidays could I take this year? When would be an appropriate time to take them? What sort of leave do I have up my sleeve? And booking them in so that you don't go 2 years without a holiday. But then also, I love the example that you gave, because that means that, once a week you get this reprieve. And I think that particularly in an industry like medicine, especially when you're on call and dealing with those kinds of work-related issues, it can really bleed into every area of your life. So it's really about carving out, whether it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour, a day, a week, at some point, to be able to switch off from what you're doing. The flip side, I suppose, though, is that we've got this new crop of doctors and healthcare professionals who, from what I hear, are understandably and in a way that was really needed, being quite boundaried and quite steadfast in those boundaries when it comes to self-care, which is wonderful. But on the other hand, we already have an industry that is really struggling. There's a lot going on for the healthcare industry at the moment, and the people who are working in it are severely impacted. And you mentioned before, having self-care is great, but not if it comes at the expense of the job that you're doing and the people that you're doing it with. And I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on that for younger doctors and healthcare professionals listening to this? How do they balance those two concepts of being resilient, practicing resilience and getting their skills up, and also having those boundaries and that intent around self-care?
It is difficult. If we're only working 40 hours a week instead of 80 hours a week, we're only getting half the experience. So it means that the juniors will need to stay in the system longer to get the same experience. But that's fine. It's good to have those boundaries. I applaud those boundaries. I applaud the self-care, as long as in addition to having boundaries and looking after ourselves, we do need to be flexible because our job requires flexibility. We need to have resilience to be able to cope with what the job throws at us. It is a tough job. So it's a fine balance. As an administrator, rostering the limited hours that we have can be a challenge because we don't get more bodies on the ground, so to speak. So it is a challenge. It's one we have to live with, I think, because what went on in the past where people completely sacrificed who they were, the quality of their lives and their families for the sake of promotions just wasn't acceptable. So we have a much better approach to things now, and I think that's great, but it does present challenges.
What's your advice for somebody who's listening to this? There's been a real culture of not speaking up and not speaking out when you're struggling with something in most industries, but that can be really hard to do in the medical industry because your peers are already under so much pressure. They might already be doing huge hours, and people listening might not think that they have the time and the capacity to be able to sit down and have a chat with them. What's your advice to somebody listening to this who knows that they don't have that balance right, that they're either feeling not resilient enough or that they don't have any self-care practices in place? What do they do?
Yeah, good question. So the first thing is to identify a safe place or a safe person. It is difficult to open up in our profession. Doctors have always traditionally been copers, and so having stiff upper lip is part of the culture. But there are people around who care. It's important to identify the people that do care, can listen, and provide you a safe place to debrief, to have a discussion about options and potential strategies for being able to get balance right and build the resilience that's required. That's not always easy to do. It's easy for me to say. It's not always easy to do. There are places where it is not safe. So it is really important to identify safe places, safe people to open up to. Most workplaces have employee welfare programs that you can engage with, and some people find that helpful. It's confidential and anonymous. You can have a chat with a psychologist who can help with some skills. It's not available to everybody. It's when you're in a public system. So certainly junior doctors in the public hospital system, that's available to them. For medical students, it's available via your universities. For doctors working in various public hospital systems, it's available that way. So that might be an option. It's not for everybody. Some people are quite uncomfortable. Don't forget that just because we're doctors doesn't preclude the need for us to have our own general practitioner. So identify a good general practitioner that you click with. Be a patient when you go to the doctor. So for people who are really struggling, there's mental health care plans that help you access psychology or counselling as well. So lots of different options, but it's often finding someone who's safe to talk to, having a chat, getting them to hold you accountable for fixing up the balance, developing some resilience strategies can be a really good place to start.
One of the things that always strikes me when I speak to people who live and work regionally, and certainly that's been the case for people that I've spoken to that are living and working in the Pilbara, they're so passionate about their place and about the people in it. What makes the Pilbara so special for you?
Oh, the people. I've got lots of my family up here, which is good for me, and the people in the town itself. For my place of work, we try and be a family first place to work, and we try and look out for each other, care about each other. That makes a massive difference. When you come to work each day knowing you know everybody by name, they know you. You can walk down the street, know lots of people in the town, and we can be involved in the town, can make a difference to the town in so many other ways besides just in a medical capacity. So yeah, it's living in a rural area is a special kind of lifestyle, and it's something that you choose to do. Our town has many thousands of people in it, but it's still a village, and that village is a good thing. Life is also, what you make of it, so you can be happy anywhere, but we're certainly happy here. We've been committed to here for some years, are grateful to be here. There you are. There's another strategy for resilience. Practicing an attitude of gratitude is an amazing resilience building tool. So I'm grateful to be here.
I'm so grateful to you for giving up your time for me and for us. So thank you for sharing your thoughts and wisdoms with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Now, in each episode, I invite regional psychiatrist Kelly Ridley to join me after reviewing my conversation, in this case with Cherelle. Kelly, Cherelle raised some really important issues. Let's tackle resilience first. It's a fairly vital tool for all of us to have, especially for our mental health. But talk me through how vital it is for healthcare professionals, because as Cherelle and I discussed, it seems like just part of the job description.
Yeah, well, we can't really do without it. And I'm a psychiatrist, so I like definitions. And I like this particular definition from the American Psychiatric Association of resilience as a process and an outcome of successfully adapting to difficult or challenging life experiences. Because I think really the key word there is process. Like a person or a system might find it more easy to be resilient because of the way it's made. But it's actually something that needs to be worked on and adapted. Otherwise, it won't be maintained. And so basically resilience is, how we survive in the face of challenging experiences. And it's not about, everything's water off a duck's back. I'm easy breezy. Every day's fine. Nothing bothers me. It's actually about being able to bounce back from a bad experience and ourselves and the systems we work in not being so stretched that we can't bounce back. So like a service or a team you work in can be resilient, or you as an individual can be resilient if you understand what threats face you or threats face the system. If you understand how those threats impact you as an individual or a system, and then have that flexibility to react to those threats. And you or the system you work in can become more resilient if you understand who the key stakeholders are in your life or in your system that you work in, and then maintain supportive partnerships. So it's really that back and forth, because you need support to maintain resilience. You can't do it yourself. So for example, a system can't rely on the loyalty or the hard work of an individual just because they pay a wage. And just in the same way that like a friendship or a romantic partnership or a work relationship can't be resilient without each partner putting in work and learning from each other, that give and take in relationships. That's what makes it become resilient, understanding strengths and weaknesses, looking after the person or looking after the system, and then the system or the other person looking after you. We rely on others and we need to rely on ourselves as well.
I love that you use the word process, and Cherelle said resilience can be learned. Certainly as a parent, whenever my kids go through something difficult, I'm like, oh, well, we're learning to flex that resilience muscle.
Yep.
Is learning it as simple as exposure to it and experiencing it, or are there other ways to teach ourselves and to build up that resilience?
I'm a big fan of the apprentice model. I think it's really common in healthcare as well, and I think it's a great way to learn resilience. Not that you just have to learn it from your manager or your team lead or something. It's something that we can learn from the people around us. Who in your life actually seems resilient, and what about them makes them resilient? And ask them, like, you actually dealt with that stressful situation really well. This has been a hard week for you. It's been a hard month for you. How are you managing that? Think about what their processes are, or look at a resilient team in your workplace. What are their processes? What about that team makes it resilient? and see if it's something that you can apply to yourself. So not everything will work for you. We've all got particular strengths and weaknesses that make one system work for us or not work for us. But if you have a look around, there's lots of ways to be resilient, and learning from someone else and putting it into practice for yourself, I think, is always the best way to learn that see one, do one, teach one kind of model. At some point, you just got to give it a go.
You're so right. We do need to do a better job of like, God, you really look like you've got the work-life balance thing down pat. You really look like you handle yourself in such a resilient way. It's like those conversations about managing ourselves within the clinical setting, but perhaps outside what would be considered clinical learning.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things that Cherelle and I talked about was this balance of, being resilient and knowing that you can manage and face quite challenging situations and bounce back from them, but also have some sense of self-care. And, women are particularly bad at that. And I think women who are particularly career focused are especially bad at that, as women often are when they are healthcare professionals. Self-care still has this very woo-woo kind of attachment to the language in itself. How do you think about it from a psychiatrist's perspective?
Yeah. So, I mean, self-care can sound a bit woo-woo, really, because it encompasses so many things and there's no right or wrong way to do self-care. The way I think about it as a psychiatrist is, broadly self-care is about enhancing your well-being so then you can be more resilient when challenges come along. Often when others think about self-care, they think about what's called hedonistic self-care or hedonistic well-being. And that's the kind of self-care that really relies on positive affective experiences, which is trying to induce pleasant emotions through enjoyable experiences. And that's the kind of self-care that's, spa days and pedicures and glasses of wine. But there's another option for self-care that I really like to think about as a psychiatrist, because it's more relevant to longer-term well-being. And it actually really helps with personal and systems resilience. And it's the concept of eudaimonic well-being. And that's the concept of having a good life, not just an enjoyable one. So the focus there is on purpose and meaning and acting on goals for yourself to achieve more self-acceptance. And so it's less about happiness as such and more about flourishing. And so it's quite broad, but I usually break it down to dividing your self-care time into things that engage your mind, things that engage your body, and things that connect you to others, and a little bit of doing absolutely nothing. And so if you look at it that way, it really expands the way you think about self-care, particularly if you are busy and you don't have an endless amount of hours to devote to hedonistic self-care. So I need to cook dinner because I need to feed myself. But instead of cooking dinner being just a chore, is there a way that I can make it engage my mind? Is there a way that I can enhance the nourishment that I'm giving to my body? Can I cook to connect with other people or to nourish other people and give back to others? And so then while cooking might not bring me immediate joy in the same way that having bubble bath might, it's a way of bringing self-care into the time that we have and the things that we have to do.
I really love that you've made that distinction. I have not heard of, was it eudaimonic?
Eudaimonic, yeah.
I mean, look, doing nothing sounds wonderful. We are so bad at doing nothing, aren't we?
Yep.
Certainly in my life, I feel like I'm trying to shove more learning or more value into every single crevice of my life. So I can't just cook. I have to cook and listen to a podcast or a university lecture or something. And we are so bad at doing nothing. And I imagine when you're a healthcare professional, particularly one working in a regional setting, whereby, as we have heard over the course of this series, you are expected to really stretch the scope of your skills, and perhaps the resources aren't what you might have if you were working in a larger town or a city. And so I imagine that it's incredibly difficult to go from 100 to 0 and to doing nothing. How much of a role does permission play in that? Because we are really bad at that.
Oh, it is. It's this idea that nothing time is wasted time when it can be so valuable. And we all have nothing time in our day, usually when we're kind of procrastinating. But you can make a choice to schedule nothing in. I'm pretty old school. I quite like a paper timetable. There's a paper calendar next to me now. And it's so full of stuff that when there's blank spaces in there, it feels like a challenge, or I could fill them up with things. And they might be enjoyable things, but they're still things. And sometimes looking at a full day, even if it's a full day of stuff you enjoy, is just so overwhelming and so exhausting that I've started in my life drawing a little box around time that's for nothing. It's boxed out. It's my time to do anything I want, but often that is just lying on the couch, not thinking about anything in particular, or sitting outside and looking at the wind go through a tree, or patting the cat. And it's not nothing time. It's actually really valuable time. It's not wasted time. It's my time. It's the time to refill my cup and connect with kind of the world I live in and my cat and all that good stuff. But I think it's really hard at times to give ourselves permission to have nothing time.
And just for clarity of definition, because I actually feel like I have anxiety hearing you talk about doing nothing, just sit there, do nothing. It feels like meditation to me, just clear your thoughts. I feel like I start breaking out in hives. When we say nothing time, it can be whatever you want time, right?
Anything you like.
It could be go for a walk, call a friend, watch an episode of a really terrible TV show on Netflix. That's what we're talking about, right?
Yeah, that there's nothing to be achieved. There's no expectations. At the end of it, you're not going to have necessarily made something or ticked something off the to-do list. It's there for anything you possibly want.
I love that. Last question for you, Kelly. What do you hope that people listening have taken away from this series? You worked regionally for a really long time. You know how incredible it can be, but also what some of the challenges can be. What do you hope somebody listening to this or to this series may have taken away?
I hope that people can see that it is a real privilege to be part of a rural community, and then to be allowed to care for people who live in that community. It's pretty amazing, but it is possible to feel personally or professionally isolated no matter where you are. You could be in Tokyo or Telfer. So it's also okay to look after yourself, and that might be making sure you use up all your allocated leave, or advocating for systems change, or accessing mental health care for yourself if you need it, or giving yourself permission to spend some time doing nothing. But all of us need help doing that at times. So if you're doing well, and particularly if you're in a position of power or leadership, look at your systems and look at the resilience in your systems. Look at the people working in your systems and see if that can be enhanced and shored up. Now, ask the people working on the ground what's working and what's not. Don't wait for the cracks to show to start papering over them. And if you aren't doing well as a system or as a person or as a team, ask for help. It's not a weakness. It's not a failing. People want to help you. They want things to go well for you. If you're a healthcare professional, you deserve the same care and attention that you provide to others. And so don't be afraid to access your GP or the EAP or your local mental health team or telecounselling. It's all there just for you, because I don't think we're particularly good at showing ourselves the same kindness that we show others, but we deserve it. And that's how things like the Pilbara family really thrive and flourish going forward.
Thank you so much for your insights, Kelly. It's been a real treat to get to bounce these really important conversations off of you. And a big thanks to you for joining us. If you haven't checked out all of our episodes, please do. You've got some incredible stories there to listen to with insights from Kelly too. If you enjoyed this episode and know someone who might get something out of it, please do send it on. And a huge thanks to the Pilbara Health Professionals Network and BHP's Vital Resources Fund for bringing this project to life. Remember, you can find more information and resources over at phpn.com.au. That's phpn.com.au. I'm Casey Beros, and it's been a pleasure to be your guide. I encourage you to connect with me over on socials and tell me what you thought of the series. Until next time, stay happy and healthy up there and take good care of yourselves and that Pilbara family. Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you.
Please note the views expressed in this series are the expert's own and can't substitute for personal medical advice.